Okay. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank all of you who've been joining us throughout the years. It's always been an honor to share with you information, news, analysis every weekend since 2005. Thank you so much for joining us. There's always interesting news coming from the United States that could potentially is having an impact on Mexico's economy, and it has to do with the announcement made by the Fed this week, which was an announcement, or at least it was interpreted to mean that the Fed is not recommending to continue to increase interest rates in the United States. As you know, those of you who follow U.S. economy, the central bank increased 25 basis points this week, from 5.0 to 5.25%. And of course, I was surprised the impact this had on the Mexican peso, which revaluated according to some of the information we were receiving towards the end of the week. It is at a 5-year low. For many industries, and for those of us who are linked to the U.S. economy, this is great news. Our pesos have more value, but this can also impact Mexico's exports. So anyway, to kind of put into context what this all means, joining us today once again is Sergio Negrete. He's a professor at ITESO for many years. He's been joining us throughout the years. Welcome to the show, Professor. I mean, put into context, what does this mean? Why is the peso doing so well? Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Ana Maria. It's really amazing. I agree. It's a mix, but the most important element, obviously, is interest rates, and it's the fact that you have that interest rates in Mexico are more than double than those in the United States. So saving in pesos, investing in pesos is much more attractive than doing it in US dollars or many other currencies. So that's really the most powerful reason to explain why the peso has appreciated so much. We have others, obviously. You need several explanations, but another element, very, very powerful, as you know, it's remittances, the flow of US dollars coming from the United States going into Mexico, that it's right now at a yearly amount of about $60 billion. Let me compare that to the annual flow of foreign direct investment that Mexico receives yearly, that it's about 35 billion. So now remittances are running at roughly double the amount of foreign direct investment that the country usually receives. I mean, remittances now outstrip oil, tourism, foreign direct investment, any that you choose. It's really a lot of money, a lot of supply of US dollars. And that's also an explanation for why the price in Mexico of the US dollar is falling. And
do we know why? Do we know? I mean, and the president talks a lot about this during his press conferences. I mean, he's very proud of this, and he considers one of his successes as a economic strategy, the fact that there's such a large amount of remittances coming to Mexico. But do we know why? Is it because there had been hard times for Mexicans living in the United States, But even then, you know, the U.S. economy is growing, so that would probably be some of the reasons why more remittances are coming. But do we have any sense why the remittances are going up? I mean, I know there's been some studies that, you know, there could even be money laundering, but you know, that's going to be hard to prove, at least for now.
It is very hard to prove, but yes, I mean, there's some, let's call it not evidence because there's none, but there are peculiar trends, let's say. One of them is that the average amount of remittance sent to Mexico is roughly $380, $400. But that figure is, you know, in 1995, it was around 300 and something dollars. I mean, it has increased since 1995, but not by much, not even by inflation. No. It's like the amount has remained low, and but the number of remittances has roughly doubled in 20 years. But the peculiar thing is that in 20 years, obviously the number of Mexicans or Mexican Americans in the US obviously has not doubled. It has increased by about 15%. So yes, you have several peculiar things that you cannot explain other than that would be a popular explanation to say, well, maybe it's money laundering. Obviously not all remittances, but a significant part. There's a think tank in Mexico called Signos Vitales, Vital Signs. Right. And they pointed out, very interesting, that the third state in the US as origin of remittances is Minnesota. Right. In the Canada border, where not many Mexicans live.
In the Canada. Yeah, well, you know, we had Enrique Cárdenas on the show a couple of weeks ago to talk about this report. And it's interesting because it doesn't necessarily conclusively indicate that there is money laundering, but there's peculiarities in the way the money is flowing between both countries that they point out. And then, of course, you have some banks are like, I think it was Wells Fargo, one of the big banks, decide that they would no longer have remittances, or there would be more stricter ways of sending money to Mexico. You have well, not to Mexico, but to Banco Bienestar. So there is, you know, and Banco Bienestar is now in the remittances business, which is also very helpful because, of course, the transfer of money will be much cheaper for Mexicans living abroad. So maybe there's more encouragement of, I don't know, of sending money. But at the end of the day, what's going to happen with the Banco de Mexico? What are they going to do now?
With respect to remittances?
The interest rates.
The interest rate. Oh, no, the interest rate, of course. Usually, what the Bank of Mexico does is fully to mirror, to follow the Federal Reserve. That is why it's not a coincidence. That is why the meeting of the Bank of Mexico is a few days after the one of the Federal Reserve. It's very open, you know, about the fact that they are merely following the leader. So, well, I expect them to increase also the interest rate by 25 basis points. And that would be also it, you know, to pick it at that level. Of course, we cannot be certain. You can also argue, you know, that the peso is so strong, that inflation is coming down, that it's not really necessary to increase interest rates any further. I mean, as you can see, I'm hedging with the several possibilities. But really, we don't know. But we have those two basic scenarios. One is no movement. That's it. We stop where it is. Or the other one is further increase along with the Federal Reserve. If you ask my bet, it's the second one, is that the Bank of Mexico will also increase the interest rate.
And it seems that the Fed has basically signaling that there's going to be no further increases. Potentially, there's going to be no further increases. Do you think that interpretation is right? Do you think that's what's going to happen?
Oh yes, by all means, but there's a reason behind this. Well, there are several, but the most powerful one is that inflation is coming down in the United States. The trend is very clear, so it's going in the right way. It's really showing that the strategy is working and that you can stop, at least temporarily. And also another very relevant reason is the damage that these interest rates are causing in the US financial system. that is Silicon Valley Bank, Republic Bank, as we know. So they don't want to damage further the financial system. The priority is always inflation. Don't take me wrong. I mean, if inflation were not going down as it is, the Fed would say, well, bad luck for the banks. We may need to rescue, we may need to help in other ways, but inflation has to come down. But it is coming down. So well, you can afford, let's say, the luxury of stopping and see what happens.
Well, it's always good to have you on the show. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Sergio Negrete. We're going to, it's great to have you. Thank you so much, Professor. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening and watching Living in Mexico. Don't go away. I'll be right back.